This story begins with Jessica, a pregnant woman who attends the retirement ceremony of her mother-in-law, the principal of a major school. The moment she is driving that rainy night, she begins to feel bad as she has many contractions that paralyze her with pain. Her condition made it almost impossible for her to drive, as she felt like she was going to faint. As she moves forward with her car, he talks to his son and tells him,
"Hold on, baby, hold on."
She, very nervous, stops to look for her cell phone to call her husband David, who is a renowned hospital doctor. But she immediately realizes that she has lost her phone, and with no more strength to drive, she is stranded in the middle of a lonely, dark street without being able to ask anyone for help. At that moment, a thief tries to steal her car and she tells him not to hurt her because she has money to give him. Then she asks the young man to help her since her child is about to be born.
"I'm having my baby."
The thief thinks about it, and tells a girl who was with him to go home because he will be back.
Go home!
On the young man's way to keep her awake, he begins to talk to her about blood fluids, arteries, and curious facts worthy of a know-it-all. Jessica is surprised to see that the thief's curiosities achieve their goal by keeping her awake, thus arriving at the hospital just in time. However, upon arriving at that hospital, a police officer recognizes the young criminal and pursues him until he takes him to the correctional facility. Meanwhile, in the operating room, Jessica faces a birth that does not seem to be normal, since she does not hear the cries of her baby. Therefore, she gets desperate and starts asking about him.
"What's wrong with my baby?"
However, the doctor didn't tell him anything about it. Minutes later, her husband David arrives, and the pediatrician tells her that her baby will be treated in neonatal intensive care. Already in the room, Jessica and her family find out that the baby was born with tetralogy of Fallot, blue baby syndrome, which requires open heart surgery since it is really serious.
It will require open heart surgery, so it's very serious.
The family is shocked by the news, but David immediately leaves to attend to his busy medical schedule, leaving his mother and his wife alone in this difficult situation. Then Jessica comments to her mother-in-law, Suzanne, that if it had not been for that young man, her baby would not have made it, since it was not a coincidence but a miracle that that young man was in that moment of true anguish, because she had no way of how to ask for help, so she asks him to find him to thank him for saving her. Hours later, David and his recovered wife visit their baby in the intensive care room, hoping that their baby will be ready to come out and they can take him home to her entire family. Suzanne, David's mother, investigates and finds the whereabouts of the boy who helped Jessica that night. She wants to thank him for everything he did, but the boy named Eli does not want thanks, since all he did was steal her car. But Susan lets him know that she doesn't believe in coincidences, because if it weren't for that they wouldn't be talking at that moment. She tells him that she wants to help him, but he doesn't believe her and leaves. Suzanne then visits the pastor of her church to ask for advice. She tells him that she doesn't know what to do with this boy, because his behavioral problems are quite serious. The pastor in response tells her that God does not choose us because of our preparation, but because he knows what we are capable of and to follow the north that God has marked for us. Suzanne tells her son David that she feels the need to help Eli, who is still in prison. But David refuses, and the conversation turns into a strong argument where David tells her that he does not want any more dramas in his life, because his baby is vulnerable and will undergo open heart surgery, in which only 1 in 4 patients manage to survive. David is so distraught that he still hasn't even decided to name his baby yet. Her mother tells him to keep the faith, but David leaves to see his baby in intensive care, leaving her alone again. Later, Suzanne meets with the tax judges to find out if she can get him out of jail, but they tell him that it will not be easy, since he will have to comply with certain restrictions to be free and be in the care of a guardian. The prosecutors also tell him that this boy is a problem, since he never had parents and always ran away from foster homes, shelters, and never had respect for authority, and they told him that he has a little sister, but she is missing.
She was 4, he was 10.
In court, the judge, dismayed, does not understand how Suzanne wants to get this young man out of jail. So the judge fined him $100,000 if he were to run away from his new guardian.
Set at $100,000 for flight risk.
So Suzanne does the unthinkable and mortgages her house to pay the fine in case Eli runs away. Let's think for a moment that would only be done by someone who is certain that God directs their steps, or simply someone who is completely crazy. Well, let's wait until the end to see the result. Hours later, Suzanne, with the judge's permission, manages to free Eli and takes him to the hospital. Jessica thanks him, but David doesn't like this and he immediately has to leave the room.
Look, you know what? You did a good thing, okay? And I'm grateful.
Then Suzanne takes Eli to her own house to give him shelter and help him, but as soon as she is careless, Eli escapes from her through the window and steals her car. When David arrives, he finds out what happened, and he complains to her because he had already warned her several times, and what he did was very dangerous, and he could also come back to hurt her. David is even more upset when he finds out that he mortgaged the house that was his grandparents' inheritance for many years.
Hey, Bob, you gotta be kidding me. You put your house, Dad's house.
The next day, a desperate Eli looks for his sister because he feels guilty for leaving her alone the night he helped Jessica with her baby. He runs desperately but cannot find her whereabouts. At that same moment, Jessica complains to David because she has not yet named her baby, but he does not want to because everything would get complicated. "Don't bury my son before God does it," Jessica tells him, heartbroken.
Don't you bury my son before God does.
"And you have to keep the faith." That's when they run into Elia, and David begins to chase him, but when she has him close to her, Jessica saves Eli to flee, since she was angry with her husband and took it out on him.
What are you doing?
David, frustrated, runs aimlessly because of everything that is happening around him. He feels that he can no longer continue and falls apart because of the whole situation with his baby, his wife, and also his mother. Suzanne is later visited by the authorities, and she has no choice but to confess that Eli has escaped. That is why she must now face the consequences of paying the bail described by the judge. Suzanne is disconcerted because she knows that she is about to lose her house, and she begins to reflect on the why of things, and why God allowed all this. For her part, Eli loses hope, and he believes he has lost his sister, so he tries to take his own life. At that exact moment, Suzanne finds a photo of her husband's kidney donor, and from the photo she realizes that the donor is Eli's father. So she begins to pray for him, understanding why God had brought him closer to her. At that moment, thanks to Suzanne's prayers, something happens in Eli's mind, that he rises to abandon the idea of taking his own life. The next morning, Eli returns to Suzanne's house and apologizes. Now, she tells him what she had discovered about Eli's father, and tells him that his father gave her husband one more year of life. Then Suzanne, handing him the photo, tells him that she wants them to now trust in the direction that God has just given them, whatever it may be. Days later, the day of surgery for Jessica and David's baby arrives. Everyone is very distraught and worried, but through it all, they decide to name him Christopher out of faith, and they decide to trust that God will be in control of their baby's open heart surgery. On the other hand, Suzanne's entire congregation and the neighbors help in the search for Eli's sister. They spend a whole day searching for her without getting any answer. When Suzanne arrives home after a long day of searching, she breaks the news that Christopher survived the operation, and the doctors indicate that he is recovering quite well. Everyone shouts with joy and full of hope for this second chance for their baby. However, Eli is not very happy, since he is worried about his little sister who is still missing. David, despite having rejected Eli, has compassion for him and helps him look for her sister. During this, they exchange photos of their parents, and that's when Eli tells him that his father was the donor who helped David's father.
Are you trying to say that your dad was my dad's donor?
He is very surprised. Then Eli can't believe that he didn't know anything, since she thought that she helped him just to return the favor that her father did for her. Likewise, David confesses that he helped him for the same reason that Eli helped his wife. That event helped bring David and Eli closer together. They even began working together to get Eli's little sister. Hours later, they arrive at a house, which is the same as the one in Eli's photo, and which was previously owned by his parents. When they enter, they are surprised to find Eli's sister in the care of the new owner of the place. Her little sister went home because she missed her parents and felt alone. Now he is relieved to discover the only thing that mattered to him in his life.
Well-mannered. Come on in.
Days later, Christopher, the cause of this whole story, leaves the hospital already recovered from the operation and ready to return home with his parents. Then David and his wife get custody of Eli's little sister before the judge, and Eli is asked if he also agrees to be adopted by David and Jessica, so Eli without hesitation agrees under oath to comply with all the rules from now on. The judge ends by officially declaring them a family in the state of Virginia.
I declare you a family.
Proverbs 3 verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will make your paths straight. This is the summary of a Christian film based on real events called God's Compass. Click here and don't miss the next story.